Good afternoon, good evening, hello, whatever time of the day it is that you're watching this video. Thank you for reviewing it. What I wanted to do with this short video is to give you an indication of what we're looking for in your Policy Audit A, Policy Audit B, and Policy Audit C. At our last face-to-face, I was a little confused about what it was that we were requiring here at Garner Webb, so I came back, spoke to everyone I could about what the policy analysis should be, and I've discovered that that format that I gave you was from 2013, and things have changed. So here's the new format for your policy analysis and audit. And I'm going to break it down into what's required, parts A, parts B, parts C, and I want to talk about them and how I would tackle it. And it's a recommendation to you. Now, the recommendation is basically a recommendation. So how you choose to tackle parts A, B, and C is up to you. But as one of those who will be an evaluator of task stream, I can tell you this is kind of how I would tackle this project. But that said, it's your project, so you do what you need to do. So what I want to do is to clarify, and that's the whole purpose of this little short video. I didn't want to get us all together again, but on our third face-to-face, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to peer review everyone's Part A, Part B, Part C, because by the time we leave on that Saturday, we want to make sure that this is ready for task stream and it is as super great as it can possibly be. So in order to clarify any kind of misinformation or anything, this video should help you tackle project analysis, policy analysis, and audit A, B, and C. So let me share with you this little handy sheet I put together, and you will have access to it as well. All right, I'm going to send this to you in an email, and so be looking for it. And this is something that I would recommend that before we get there on that next weekend, that you already have your rough draft of all these items put together. All right, the policy audit and analysis, this is your guidance. There are three parts to it, not four. Evidently, 3 years ago, they removed the safety component, part two, so that's out. So here's what I know and what the evaluator, the other task stream evaluator, will be looking for in your project A, B, and C. And they're each separate, and they will be submitted separately. So it's not one big project. You will actually have three different pieces to the project. Part A is your policy analysis, and how I've broken this down in the two bullets, you have exactly what's required by the manual. So this is language straight from the manual, but I've also given you a page recommendation because anything less than 10 to 12 pages is probably not going to be thorough enough. Anything over 20 is going to be too much. So I would shoot from in between 12 to 20 pages. So I've kind of broken it down for the whole everything. So I've kind of broken it down for you. The first two bullets, let's look at policy A, part A, policy analysis, 3 to 5 pages. You have two bullets, and those are straight instructions from the rubric to get an excellent grade or 4, as well as from the guidance from the handbook. Now, if I were tackling this, and basically you're conducting a system policy audit and analysis, and it's got to be something that you have talked to your immediate supervisor about to make sure they understand what you're doing. And the reason why we do that is because we don't want you to go into a landmine. We want you to choose something that will not get you in trouble if you stir up a nest. The second thing is you're going to have to put together a team. It could be 2 to 3 other colleagues who will be your collaborative team. And they will kind of be the people you bounce ideas off. And you'll use them in Part A as well as Part C. So they're the same collaborative team. These are 3 or 4 of your colleagues. It could be people in the class. It could be if they're in your district. It also could be people in your school, people in your district, whomever. So if I were writing Part A, I would tackle it in 6 major topic areas and try to build a paragraph or 2 around each one of these areas. My first area would be an introduction to the project. Why am I doing this? What's the requirements of 708? Why am I doing this? Why did I choose to work on my doctorate? A little bit about an introduction to the project, the whys of it. The second paragraph would be the collaborative team, how you selected these people, what they bring to the table. The third paragraph is a policy that's been chosen that you chose to cite. I would cite that policy as much as possible. That doesn't count as one of your pages, by the way, but I would cite that policy in there and a reason why you selected that policy. So what's your reasonings behind that, which could also go back to that introduction to the project, your reasons for selecting this particular policy. The next big paragraph I would have is on my interview notes. When we got my team, my collaborative team together, we started talking about it. Ooh, pull together some of that discussion, pull together some of the ideas that each person brought to the table. The next big paragraph would be those notes with the policy influencer. So once you decided you're going to address this policy, you talk to your collaborative team, now you go back to that supervisor and you have that conversation with them. That's your influencer. What are their thoughts? What are some of the takeaways from that? And then the last paragraph would be what's next. Your thoughts about what you're going to accomplish next, who you're going to involve, what kind of things your next steps is basically what that is. So that's part A. Policy analysis, you picked the policy, you got your team, you reviewed it, you talked about it, all that in one big piece. So in this, you have audited a policy and you have analyzed the policy. This is the bulk of the hard work. Well, not really. Part B is probably the bulk of the hard work. Part B is your findings. And again, I'm recommending at least 3 to 5 pages. Your 3 bullets straight from the manuals about what's needed and from the rubric. It has to be related to your district mission and vision, of course. You got to make recommendations for changes, and you've got to have a written report that you are actually going to sit down with your designee and share the findings of the audit report. I would tackle this particular section at least in 9 different paragraph forms. And basically, here they are. I would talk about the history of the policy, what you found out, who the influencers have been. I'll talk about in the next paragraph some of the policy weaknesses, the reason why you selected this policy. What are some weaknesses of it, the existing policies, some strengths of the next paragraph, some strengths of the existing policy. Next paragraph, recommended changes. Just following the format. Next paragraph will be some of the rationale from those changes. Here you're pulling in some of the collaborative team suggestions and others. The next step, now that you have this recommended changes, what are you going to do with it? You're going to let it sit on the superintendent's desk? You're going to let it sit with your supervisor, or do you want to foresee it going further to the Board of Education? And then I would talk about who the influencers you've met along the way. The influencers of the policy that when it was written, and the influencers now, the people who can move this policy to procedures and policies and make it a existing policy or change the existing policy. I would also be interested in a paragraph on what was the influencer's reaction. And this is when you're sitting down and you're sharing your findings and you're kind of reading the face of the supervisor. You're kind of listening to what their questions are. You're listening to their suggestions. So this is an awesome paragraph about the influencer's reaction. And then the last thing you need to do is to make sure a rationale that it fits and the mission and the vision of the district. And that's part B, the findings. Now part C, which is probably the largest part, and the most important part to garner well, is the reflections of the process. Again, I'm recommending from 5 to 6 pages. There, your 2 bullets come straight from the manual, provide a reflection of the experience, and with, again, that stakeholder input, evaluate the process. So it's a reflection and evaluation. On this particular section, I would recommend 9 different kinds of paragraphs that you address. And again, the paragraph could be, one thing could be 2 paragraphs, it could be 3 paragraphs. These are just the 9 things that I would build a paragraph around, or paragraphs. Thoughts about the selection of the collaborative team. Looking back on it, were the right people? Were they well representative of the school? Did they know what they were talking about? Some thoughts about, some reflection about how you selected the collaborative team. The next part is who was missing. Some reflections about who would have made the team stronger, what could they have brought to the table. The third is the team process, using the collaborative team, some of the pros and cons. Discuss that. The next paragraph, lessons learned from that team process. Next one, lessons learned, go back to the influencers that you've had to deal with, the people above you who are the ones who actually will take the policy and run with it. The lessons learned about the district policy process, how policies make their way to be final approved by the board. Now the last 3 paragraphs should really be a reflection on what it means to you. Lessons learned for your next administrative job. If you're going to be the next superintendent, if you're going to be the next director of curriculum, then what have you learned about this whole process in A, B, and C about what you need to be more prepared for that next administrative job? The next paragraph is your final comments about the process, how all it came together, kind of what you learned. And then the final one is how did 708 help you or not help you prepare to do this project, but more importantly, to prepare to understand how policies work and the influencers and the process. So our plan is on the next face-to-face, we're going to peer review everybody's A, B, and C. So come prepared with an A, B, and C report. What I'd like to do at the end of that weekend is to have a final product that I can sign off on and we can put into task stream, because that's the next big thing for you to do. All right, if this reflection is not helpful, let me know. Again, it's going to go out in video form. I'll be more than glad to talk to any of you personally about a policy. If you've got one, you want to shoot it to me and ask me, is this a good one? This is a great policy to work on. I'll be glad to work with you on that. If you want to, our next Zoom session is November the 7th, and I know we've signed up for 10-minute blocks, but if you want me to take about 15 minutes at the very beginning, move everybody by 15 minutes, or if you want to Zoom in at some point, make an appointment, and we can talk about the project in particular. So you're going to be getting this sheet as well as this YouTube video. If you have any questions, give me a call, and don't fret, we're going to make it work, but go ahead, don't turn in anything to task stream yet on this part A, part B, or part C. I want to have a chance to look at it, have it peer reviewed before we finally turn it in. Any questions, give me a call, shoot me an email. You all have a great evening or great afternoon, whenever. Adios. We'll see some of you on the 7th and all of you on the next face-to-face.